Hello, I'm live. One of the craziest things about YouTube Live is that you really don't see yourself clearly in the camera until it actually goes live. It's looking to me like I don't have a ton of sound here. Let's see what I can do about that. I'm trying to use my interface. I'm going to turn it up a little bit so that it's a higher quality sound. Hang on. How about now? No, I think this is probably as good as we're going to get. Okay. So I watched the movie Bedknobs and Broomsticks with my kids over the weekend. And I'd seen this movie before. I've seen this movie many, many times going back to when I was a little kid. But until this time, I had not noticed what an amazing movie it is when it comes to describing the life of the spirit in the West, in America, in Canada, where I live, in the Western world, in England. And I thought it would be interesting to put it out there because my general ethos on all things internet is just don't do anything that's going to get you any actual followers. Don't do anything that people are actually asking for. Don't take part in what seems to be the obvious conversation. And so, yeah, I'm continuing my foray into absolute obscurity. And I wanted to describe this movie and maybe inspire one or two people in the world to go and watch it again with these fresh eyes. If nothing else, you can enjoy the fun of the bird feeder outside my window, right beside my head, which is incredibly fun as winter comes here in Canada and the birds get desperate for food. It's very entertaining. So, all right, Bedknobs and Broomsticks. When I was a kid, I watched this movie several times, and I'm still not sure why I was allowed to watch it because I was raised by a conservative Southern Baptist pastor, and the movie centers around an unrepentant witch. And the only indication of any kind of organized religion is two scenes, as far as I remember, two scenes in which the local priest of this witch is sort of trying to put his oar in about the spiritual life of these children that the movie focuses around. So it seems like an unlikely candidate for being a wonderful description of the life of the spirit, that I think applies as much to organized religion or Christianity as anything else. So the movie Bedknobs and Broomsticks takes place during World War II. It's when there's a lot of danger of bombing in London, and children were sent to the countryside to get away from the danger of being exploded. And incidentally, that's also what was going on in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe in the Narnia series. But in this case, you've got these three children who are sent to the countryside. They're kind of the last stragglers to be placed. And they get placed with this kind of unwilling witch known as Miss Price. And she doesn't want to take them in. They don't particularly want to be taken in by her. But she is nearing the end of a witchcraft course, a mail-away witchcraft course. And in the first scene that she appears in, she's receiving her broom, which is one of her final things to receive from her witchcraft course. And she's kind of secretive about it, but like she is one of 4 characters in the movie Bedknobs and Broomsticks that I would characterize as being sort of representing a particular way of thinking about the life of the spirit, the mystery of the unseen, spiritual life. I'm trying to avoid language that makes it seem as though this movie is sort of in some way promoting Christianity. I don't think it is. I think it's in a pretty major way. I think it's something Christians should think about and pay attention to. Because there are 4 characters in this movie that represent very real ways that people can think about and approach the unseen, the spiritual world, the spirit world, that I think most people who I interact with, like on Twitter these days, are very convinced that we need to interact with, right? Like the notion that there's just nothing, that we are physically material beings, that consciousness is kind of an illusion that arises out of our physical processes and is kind of not really real, not to be paid too much attention to. I think that's just going away. I don't even think I really need to attack that in particular, because it seems to just be naturally dying off, and people who sort of are fundamentalists for that way of thinking are not really, they're kind of laughed off often as much as crazy religious fundamentalists are. So anyway, with Miss Price, we meet our first person who is interacting with the world of magic, the world of spirit, the world of the unseen. And she is kind of an interesting character, and not at all cookie cutter, because she's very practical. Like, she knows that she's not a super skilled witch. She's not dogmatic about the world of witchcraft. She doesn't have a community of witches around her. She's not aesthetically actually super witchy. But the one thing she does have is just a sort of uncomplicated belief that this magic is real. And we find that she believes that this magic is real because she is capable of doing magic. She knows that her spells that she does are not overly effective, like they don't last a super long time, but her belief in magic is unwavering. The children that she brings into her home don't believe in magic particularly, although the youngest, Paul, turns out to be one of these 4 characters that represent ways to approach the life of the spirit. And so if Miss Price as a witch is the sort of non-skeptical believer in this magic and in this unseen world, she is also being in some ways initiated into a system, into standardizing things, into using particular magical words and thinking of magic in a particular way. She even sees the hierarchy of herself versus her professor, Professor Emilius Brown, who hasn't entered the story yet. But Paul, the youngest child, sees the world in a more magical way, in which he doesn't particularly care about conventions and magic words. He doesn't even care, as we see in the future, about the distinction between the imagination and the real world. And he's very pragmatic about it. He's very practical. but he's also just a fully enchanted person. So the children and Miss Price are not particularly getting along. They are trying to escape and go back to London when they notice Miss Price on her broomstick, taking her first awkward flight in which she crashes. And their first thought is actually to blackmail her, which is interesting. So they decide to stay. And when they have a discussion with Miss Price about how they know she's a witch, she agrees to give them a special spell just for them as kind of a gift, which is the incredible traveling spell. And this is where things kind of start to get interesting. The traveling spell, she needs something that she can twist. And of course, who has something that she can twist but little Paul? He has stolen the bed knob from the bed that they're sleeping on in her house. And she says, "Oh, that'll do nicely." And she enchants the bed knob so that the bed now becomes a conveyance for travel. And that is another really interesting thing. You know, like I've personally had a lot of things in life recently pointing to the idea of dreams as being far more informative and far more real in our lives than they've been typically described, right? We think of dreams as only being maybe indicative of the things that have been on our minds. And then when the dream is over, we can kind of pick it apart and say, like, where did this come from in life, right? Whereas dreams have very wild properties. Dreams can be informative in a lot of ways, and dreams can be, I mean, I fully believe dreams can be transmissions from your future self or from something else that's speaking to you through your dreams. And I think they can be very enlightening. So the fact that the bed is the way that they travel is fascinating. So the first thing they want to do is travel. The first thing Miss Price wants to do is travel to London, because she's received word from her professor, her witchcraft professor, that because of the war, he can't complete the course, and she won't be getting this spell that she needs. She's been looking for this spell. This is one of the interesting things about Miss Price. She has been pursuing this magic course with a very altruistic motive, which she hasn't elucidated yet. She hasn't told anybody, and she needs this substitutionary locomotion spell, which is a spell that makes inanimate things animate, which, if you're interested in the world of magic at all, is kind of a fun and neat concept. That she's got a plan to help the war effort and possibly even end the war using this spell, this substitutionary locomotion spell. So they go to England to try and find Emilius Brown. They, of course, find him right away quite easily. And then it is discovered that Emilius Brown, who I'm calling the third exemplar of a Western spiritual mindset, Emilius Brown is actually just a street corner magician. And he's all about show business. And yet, interestingly, he doesn't have a manipulative desire, particularly. He does seem to want to spread enchantment. He does seem to want to spread joy. Yes, he wants to make a profit, but they portray him very carefully so that he doesn't ever seem like a purely negative character. And when he discovers that Miss Price can do magic through his own spells, he's flabbergasted and he's enchanted himself. He's so excited. He doesn't seem to be skeptical once he has seen a little bit of her magic. He doesn't seem to have any skepticism about it. And he does want to use Miss Price um, for profit. He wants to start doing magic shows where there's real magic. He'll present himself as the magician, and she will present herself as the assistant. He's already got this whole plan worked out, but she'll actually be the one who can do magic. And so I believe that Emilius Brown is representative of a type of basically religious person in the West that doesn't get discussed in the public conversation regarding religion very often. And that is a person who has lost their enchantment, who has lost their actual belief in miracles, in maybe even in spiritual beings, but is going through the motions because they have an intuition that it's important, that there's something for people here. And they haven't lost the show business side of it, but it's also not purely about profit. And I've seen these people in my upbringing in Christianity and the type of Christianity I was raised in. You see all of these people who are very convinced of the good that can be done through a religious and spiritual context, who are actually doing good in the world and want to do good in the world. But deep down, they don't believe anymore. They don't expect any miracles. They don't expect any real magic to come from this world. So they're kind of in the process of disenchantment. So that's our third character. And what he tells them when he discovers that the magic has actually been working is that he got all the magic spells from this old book that he got at Portobello Road, which is a kind of a street market. And that he took those spells out of the book and he gave them a bit of pizzazz, his own little spin, and he's been selling them to his students to make a buck. And he's delighted and shocked that they actually work. So she says, okay, well, no problem. I just need the substitutionary locomotion spell and we can be on our way. So they go to where he has the book, and they look for the spell. And it turns out that spell is on the last page that he has of the book, and the back part of the book has been torn away. And he says, well, I don't have the rest of the spell, I guess. And she says, well, that won't do. Like, where can we find it? And he says, well, I got this spell in the at Portobello Road. And so they go to Portobello Road to try and find the bookseller who originally sold him the book. And the Portobello Road scene is another really fascinating description of Western society that I think in this lens that I'm just such a nerd that this was really interesting and cool to me. But Portobello Road, in my opinion, represents the beauty that is still inherent in the West and in Western multiculturalism. And basically, Portobello Road is a place of shysters and thieves, and there's prostitutes. There are immigrants. It's crawling with immigrants and marginalized people who are having a great time. It's portrayed as both being a place where you buy fakes and forgeries and false versions of the great works of history, right? There's great works of art that are forged. There's valuable items, like valuable statues and housewares and weapons and all kinds of things that are all clearly forgeries, right? They're fake. And yet there's this thriving, bustling culture happening there. The Portobello Road scene is one of the funnest scenes. It's a big long song with a bunch of dance numbers, and yes, it's problematic in 2024. There's a lot of cultural stereotypes, like very strong cultural stereotypes, and yet they're all there together. They're all getting along, and to me, this represents the last remaining enchantment in our culture, and just the actual human desire for togetherness and enchantment. Because even though everything's fake, everything's false, they are together and they're having a great time. They're singing together, they're dancing together. And that brought up another thing that I find fascinating about this movie, and that is that every character in Bedknobs and Broomsticks, almost without exception, is a marginalized character. So the three kids are very poor. They're clearly from poverty. Miss Price is not particularly poor, but she is a witch. She's not accepted by society. Emilius Brown is a street corner entertainer. And then they go to Portobello Road and they meet all these other marginalized people. And I think it's interesting. I know that there's a legitimate argument that marginalization is being held up as as almost like a virtue these days, and it's a negative thing to sort of act as though marginalized people are better than the rest of us. And I'm not saying that they're better than the rest of us, but the movie does kind of illustrate how in the margins there is space, in the margins of a book, in the margins of society, there is space for this kind of life of blending and of bridging between people and cultures. And it's easier to, in a way, when you're marginalized, when you're not part of the system. So they're at Portobello Road. They're looking for the other half of the book. And as all the shops and sellers in Portobello Road are scattered by one cop, a cop shows up, and basically everybody has to move on because they don't have probably a license to sell there or whatever. So the cop is one of the only people in the movie that is sort of representative of the system or of the man. And of course, he scatters and dissipates all of this beautiful life that's been going on in Portobello Road. But the Miss Price, the children, and the professor are left, and they get basically mugged by a guy with a knife. And this tough guy with the knife works for the bookseller. And the bookseller is the final person in my 4-person theory about the life of the spirit in the West. The bookseller represents a new kind of approach to the spirit world. This tough guy takes them down to the basement. Of course, he's in the basement where the bookseller has his shop. And the tough guy is threatening them with death, obviously, with his knife. But somehow, for some reason, he lets them bring the bed. The bed that they've been traveling on kind of bumps down the stairs, and it's sitting there. And the bookseller presents himself to them, paradoxically, as a kindly old man who's very excited to see them. He is an old man, and he does have the other half of the spell book. And he says, "This is a wonderful opportunity for us both. You've got half of the spell, I've got the other half of the spell, and we can work this out in a way that's mutually beneficial." And of course, the fact that they've been brought there at knife point, clearly on his orders, you just feel this strange tension in the scene. And it occurred to me that this man represents basically the hidden belief, the secret belief of the elites and the powers that be in magic, in the spirit world, that is there. In other words, we don't know what this man's purpose is for getting the substitutionary locomotion spell, but we can be pretty sure that it's nothing good. And so it becomes clear to our heroes, to the children, Miss Price and the professor, that this man can't be trusted. But they look at the spell, they look at the book, the two halves of the spell, and the magic words are not in it. And all that's there is an indication that the magic words can be found on this special amulet, and that the amulet is worn by the king of the animals. And so at this point, there's sort of this is the moment of a leap of faith. And you see right away that the bookseller, in a sense, the bookseller believes in magic, but is a completely unenchanted person. Because when they say we've been using magic, he doesn't seem to believe it. And this is when one of the true heroes of the movie, little Paul, speaks up, the youngest child. And he says, well, I know where the amulet is. This amulet that has the magic words on it is on the island of Naboombu in the land of the animals. And he's got a little children's book that he stole from the nursery earlier in the movie of the island of Naboombu, and the little star amulet is on is around the neck of the Lion King, this cartoon Lion King. And it's like, what? Like you know that in real life, this would be the end of most adults in this journey. It'd be like, no, that's impossible. That's imaginary, right? But if you think about it in this framework that I'm sort of laying out, he is saying the magic words are to be found in the imagination. We have to go to a place of pure imagination, and even the imagination of a child, to find the magic words that actually bring this ancient spell to life, that make this ancient spell actually work. And like strangely, Miss Price, Eglantine Price, believes him instantly. And they say, well, we're going to go now. And, the bookseller and his thug say, like hell you are going to go, like you're not going anywhere. You're in our basement. You're trapped here. And they think, well, we're going to use this bed to travel. And they don't even, kind of take their time about it. They don't go that quickly. They just kind of get on the bed and they say the island of Naboombu, and they tap the bed knob and turn it. And sure enough, they go to this place that's purely in the imagination. They go to an imaginary place on the bed. And they do find, I mean, it's a goofy scene, and there's not on the island itself, I don't see a ton of symbolism particularly. It's just a really fun scene, and I feel like kids really enjoy it. They do steal the amulet from the Lion King and bring it back into the real world to use for substitutionary locomotion. And I just think that's amazing, because it speaks to the fact that whatever enchantment, whatever magic there is in the real world, in our world, is not purely from ancient books. It's not purely from texts that we can read, learn, and memorize and do this magic. It's not dead. It's alive. That magic is alive. That faith and spirit is alive. And that our imaginations now, informed by our lives now, are going to provide the final pieces of the puzzle of enchantment. That it really isn't, that it has to be fresh and alive, and it has to be something that children can understand, that new people can understand. And so they come back to the present. The amulet disappears because it's from the imagination, and they're trying to remember the spell. And of course, Paul says, oh, it's actually in the book. It's in this children's book that I had already. And so they get the spell out of that. And meanwhile, the Nazis have actually parked a submarine in the bay by this British town that they're in, this small British town, and are quietly invading. The Nazis are actually among them now. The Nazis are in the town. And in other words, if this substitutionary locomotion spell is going to work, they've got to use it right away. And so the children and Miss Price are imprisoned, and they're sort of locked up. But the great thing is that they are locked up in an old military museum that's full of the weapons of the past. It's full of horse armor and man armor and swords and bows and arrows and all these things. And so they end up using the substitutionary locomotion spell to reanimate the weapons of the past. And I think by this point, if you've made it 31 minutes into this, nobody's going to watch this. I'm so sorry. I had to get this off my chest. But if you've made it this far, I think you'll instantly recognize the resonance of the fact that these weapons and the armor of the past are animated by the freshness and the enchantment of these people now and of this child now and the imagination. And they have come to life again. And they fight the Nazis and they kick them out, and they're victorious over the Nazis. And I think that this describes the tension that we're experiencing in our society. Interest in enchantment and in things of the spirit, things like, all kinds of things. Christianity is just one of them, but there's also astrology and the occult, esotericism. There's tarot and witchcraft again, and all of these things that people are just sort of inexorably drawn towards, in which our intuition is that they're not dead, but our culture of disenchantment is making it very hard for us to see these things. I find that I struggle very much myself to believe in the enchanted world, to believe that there is magic to be had. I don't know the form that this magic is necessarily taking. I know that I experience things in my own life that seem to be the enchanted world tugging at my coat, tugging at my shirt sleeve. And pulling me forward, and it's exciting. You have to learn to be excited by these small things, these small successes, even just a feeling of connection to the spirit world. And I think Bedknobs and Broomsticks describes this in a beautiful way. So anyway, man, if you watched 33 minutes of this video, please comment. I've seen a couple people pop in and out, and I totally understand it. I'm talking about a movie from 1971 that nobody's talking about. And I am just, putting the nail in the coffin for anyone who might have thought this channel was ever going to have anything current and relevant. I'm not talking about the upcoming election, in the US. I'm not talking about the hot button issues of the time, but I am talking about something where I think if we get our heads around this, we can approach those things in a way that isn't stultifying and doesn't kill our souls further. It takes this muffling blanket off of our souls to approach some kind of a re-enchantment, some kind of a non-dogmatic, expectant sense of the life of the spirit. So anyway, thanks for watching. I'm absolutely sure that no one is or will watch, but I appreciate my online friends and the people who stimulate this kind of thinking in me. And I wish you all the best.